Yes, 4K at 240 frames per second. A feature we've been waiting for a long time, and that hardly anyone expected from the DJI Osmo Pocket 4. But high quality extreme slow motion footage isn't the only new feature of the Osmo Pocket 4. Today I'll try to find answers to the following 3 questions. How good is DJI's new Pocket camera really? How does it differ from the Pocket 3? And is it worth upgrading? To answer these questions, we need to look at 10 important categories, from changes to the camera's design to image quality, including in photo mode, tracking performance, and special new features. The Osmo Pocket 4 was provided to me by DJI. However, this video does not contain any additional paid sponsorship. At first glance, the Pocket 4 looks almost identical to the Pocket 3, but there are a few important and interesting differences. In addition to a slightly redesigned surface, the Pocket 4 is slightly longer and also 12 grams heavier than the Pocket 3. You can feel the difference when you hold both cameras in your hand. In practice, however, the difference is hardly noticeable. 3 other differences are much more important. When you flip the display to the side, you will find 2 additional buttons below the display on the Pocket 4. The left button is for zooming. Press it once for the 2 times lossless zoom. Press it twice more and the camera switches to the 4 times digital zoom. The right button, on the other hand, is customizable. In the default settings, you can use the button to switch to photo mode or lock the gimbal. In addition to the 2 new buttons, the joystick has also been redesigned. The Pocket 4's joystick protrudes significantly further, is better defined, and is therefore much easier to use. In addition, unlike with the Pocket 3, you can also adjust the movement speed of the gimbal by pressing the joystick more or less strongly in one direction. And the third important new feature in the design is the port here on the gimbal head. This magnetic connection allows you to attach a portable fill light, which is also powered by the camera via the port. That's another useful new feature. But there is something else that's new. While the Pocket 3 comes with this cover to protect the gimbal, DJI has now developed this gimbal clamp for the Pocket 4. This is also partially attached magnetically. It locks the gimbal and display in place, protecting the 2 sensitive components of the Pocket 4. These are all useful and welcome improvements. On the other hand, this also means that certain weaknesses of the Pocket 3 have not been eliminated. I would say that the display is identical. It is therefore still a bit small and not particularly robust, which makes it a potential weak point. The gimbal itself also appears to be identical. We will check a little later to see if it now has a little more range of movement. But first, let's look at the most interesting category: image quality. While the Pocket 4 has hardly changed externally, it has been significantly revised internally. The most important change is that the Pocket 4 has received a new sensor. Even though the new sensor is also 1 inch in size and therefore not bigger than that of the Pocket 3, it is supposed to have a better dynamic range and also enable better low-light performance. All of these comparison shots are straight from the camera and have not been edited. They were also taken using the default settings. Interestingly, the bitrate on the Pocket 4 can be set to high. This increases the maximum bitrate to up to 180 megabits per second. The maximum bitrate on the Pocket 3 is 130 megabits per second. The lens has obviously not been changed. It is a lens with a focal length of 20 mm and an aperture of f2. But these are just specs. What matters is how the shots look in direct comparison. What I've always liked about the Pocket 3 is its soft cinematic look. And of course, that also applies to the Pocket 4. Both cameras take very beautiful high quality shots. The same focal length means that the field of view for handheld shots is still a bit tight. These shots, for example, were taken at arm's length. For other shots, I used a curved selfie stick for a wider field of view. Fortunately, the same lens also means that the accessory lens and filters from the Pocket 3 also work on the Pocket 4. This means that the Pocket 4 has the same accessory lens to extend the field of view. Here you can see a test shot taken with the wide-angle lens. The other comparison shots were taken with the standard lens. The colors of the shots taken with both cameras are very similar, and there are hardly any differences. DJI may have made a few minor adjustments to the blue tones, but you have to look very closely to see them. What is more noticeable is that the Pocket 4 sometimes exposes the shot a little brighter. This is particularly noticeable in shots taken in the snow. It seems that the Pocket 4 adjusts the exposure more to the face and always tries to expose the face optimally, regardless of the overall brightness of the image. But this also means that in these shots in the snow and in very good weather, the entire image looks slightly overexposed. But, and this must also be said, the highlights, in this case the snow, are not completely blown out. The details are retained even when shooting with the Pocket 4, and you can darken the bright areas in post if necessary. If there is no face in the image, The difference in exposure is not as noticeable, even when shooting in the snow. In terms of detail, there is hardly any difference. When we zoom in, here to 300%, there are hardly any differences to be seen. If anything, I would say that the Pocket 3's image looks slightly sharper. The shots taken with the 2x lossless zoom also look very similar. Although this is a digital zoom, it only results in a slight loss of quality, because it simply uses a cropped section of the higher resolution sensor. By the way, there is a new feature here. Unlike the Pocket 3, that 2x lossless zoom can now also be activated during recording. And it also works in log or in photo mode. In all these situations, only a standard digital zoom is available on the Pocket 3. Earlier, I said that the Pocket 4 is supposed to have better dynamic range. And that is indeed the case. The Pocket 3 already has a very good dynamic range. And you have to look at very difficult shooting situations to see clear differences. But here, for example, against the light, you can clearly see that the details in the background are preserved when shooting with the Pocket 4, while they are blown out with the Pocket 3. So I would say yes, the dynamic range of the Pocket 4 is better, but the difference is not huge. In addition to a normal 10-bit color profile, both cameras also have a log profile. And in this context, there is an important difference. The Pocket 4 shoots in D-Log, while the Pocket 3 uses the log profile D-Log-M. Both are 10-bit, of course. The color profile D-Log, which the Pocket 4 uses, is significantly flatter, has even less contrast, and allows for a slightly better dynamic range. From this perspective, it would be the better log profile, but it is also a little more difficult to edit and therefore not as beginner-friendly. Of course, there are LUTs available for conversion for both color profiles. For these comparison shots, I converted both shots using DJI's LUTs. It is interesting to note that unlike the Pocket 3, the Pocket 4 no longer has an HLG profile, at least not with the beta firmware that was active before the release. HLG allows for the display of significantly brighter highlights, but also requires an HDR screen that can reproduce these bright highlights. Here on my iPhone, you can see the difference quite clearly, but I'm optimistic that the feature will be added via an update at a later date. On the other hand, the Pocket 4 has several creative and cinematic color filters that reproduce a professional film look. These look really good and are especially useful if you don't want to edit the colors of your shots yourself. Although this shot here would look fantastic even without a filter. Unfortunately, the Pocket 4 is also unable to rotate the gimbal sideways to take vertical shots in portrait mode. For this reason, vertical shots are still only possible as a crop. This means that shots in portrait mode also result in a heavily cropped field of view on the Pocket 4 and are only possible in the reduced resolution of 3K. Yes, of course, you can hold the camera sideways, but that's not really what it's designed for. Let's take a look at a few more indoor shots. Both Pocket cameras are well suited for these shots and would also be a good choice as the main camera for a YouTube channel, for example. As you can see, there are minor differences, but they are not necessarily immediately noticeable, and the shots from the two cameras are often very similar. But as we saw at the beginning, the Pocket 4 has a special and very cool new feature. It can shoot in 4K at 240 frames per second. And as a fan of action shots, this is perhaps the best new feature for me personally. With 240 frames per second, you can shoot slow motion footage at up to 10%. This was already possible with several action cameras, but only in a very reduced resolution of 1080 and in relatively poor quality. These recordings are hardly usable. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Pocket 4 is now the first consumer camera that can do this in 4K. And that's an important feature, because super slow motion recordings are not only suitable for cool action scenes, but also for interesting and cinematic B-roll recordings. This feature alone could be worth buying this camera for some people. But of course, that's not so important to everyone. After all, the Pocket 3 can shoot in 4K at up to 120 frames per second. Here you can see the difference between 120 and 240 frames per second. In slow motion mode, the sound is recorded separately on both cameras, and the slow motion mode results in a slight crop on the Pocket 4, but the feature is very cool. A surprisingly big difference can also be seen in low light. As I said, the Pocket 4 does not have a larger sensor, and I think it uses the same lens. In any case, it has a lens with the same aperture. Nevertheless, the image quality in low light has been improved. Like the Pocket 3, the Pocket 4 has its own low light shooting mode, which I used for these shots. It should be noted that it is already very dark here, and both cameras take really good shots. The main difference is that the Pocket 4 reduces image noise much more significantly. This also makes the image look a little softer overall. but the Pocket 4's image has significantly less noise, especially when it's very dark. The difference is particularly noticeable in these vlogging shots, although some of the difference is certainly lost due to the compression on YouTube. Of course, there will be those who say that the Pocket 4's noise reduction is too aggressive and that they would prefer to do it in post. And sure, you can still shoot in normal video mode with manual settings and reduce the automatic noise reduction. But this is not possible in low light mode. At the beginning, we saw that the Pocket 4 supports a new fill light. I tested it here for a few shots. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it and the look it creates. But when it's really extremely dark, the light can of course be useful. I took many of today's shots with active tracking. This is simply easier when using two cameras, even if this can lead to slight jerkiness when walking. And there are also some improvements when it comes to tracking that we should take a look at. I mounted both cameras on a tripod and did a general tracking test. Both cameras react very similarly and also very quickly and well to the movements of the subject, but they lose the subject if it disappears from the frame for too long. Purely in terms of general tracking performance, I don't see any relevant difference. But the Pocket 4 has several new tracking features. Tracking is now also available in low light mode, which is not the case with the Pocket 3. You can now also track subjects with up to a 4x zoom. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the 4x zoom, but with the 2x lossless zoom, this can lead to good results. In addition to gimbal tracking, there are also two new focus tracking features that keep a subject within a group of people in focus. So it's not about the camera following you, but rather about keeping a moving subject sharp and in focus in difficult situations. With subject lock tracking, the camera recognizes all faces in the image and you can then select a face by tapping on it. The camera will then track that specific subject until it disappears from the image. With registered subject priority, you can register a subject before shooting. The camera will then prioritize the registered subject over other subjects when focusing, so that the registered subject is always sharp and in focus. As I said, another feature is about camera tracking but focus tracking. But they can both be very useful. As you can see, the gimbals on both cameras look identical. Nevertheless, I had hoped that a full 360-degree rotation would now be possible. Unfortunately, this is not the case. The range of movement of the Pocket 4's gimbal is identical to that of the Pocket 3. Especially when you turn it to the left, it quickly reaches its limit. Both cameras have the same gimbal modes and offer similar stabilization performance. But did you see the difference in the vibration test? The vibrations look much worse on the Pocket 3. However, I suspect that this has less to do with the stabilization than with the rolling shutter. This would suggest that the Pocket 4 sensor is rendered much faster than the Pocket 3 sensor. While the gimbal has remained the same, the photo mode has been improved. One of the major weaknesses of the Pocket 3 is certainly its low resolution for photos. Although the Pocket 3 also takes good photos, a maximum resolution of 9 megapixels is no longer up to date. Fortunately, that has now changed. The Pocket 4 has its own super photo mode that allows it to take pictures with up to 37 megapixels. And especially when zoomed in, here at 500%, you can clearly see the difference. This means that the photos not only look better on a larger screen, they can also be cropped much better. This makes the Pocket 4 better suited for photos. And the Pocket 4 has another relatively significant improvement. With 1545 mAh, it has a significantly more powerful battery than the Pocket 3 with 1300 mAh. And this is also clearly reflected in the recording time. Here in the office at 4K 60, the Pocket 3 shoots for about 1 hour and 54 minutes. The Pocket 4 shoots for about half an hour longer, so for 2 hours and 24 minutes. In 4K 30, the difference is even bigger. The Pocket 3 records for 2 hours and 2 minutes, while the Pocket 4 records for 3 hours and 24 minutes. That's pretty impressive. Incidentally, here in the office at around 23 degrees Celsius, neither camera had any problems with overheating, even when recording in 4K 60. Both cameras come with relatively good internal microphones. For this shot, I've set audio recording to stereo and directional audio to front, and I turned noise reduction on. The Pocket 4 then has a few new audio features. One of them is vocal boost, which I now turned on. It enhances the voice recording and is especially well suited for vlogs. Then there is spatial audio, which creates some sort of 3D audio. So the sound seems to come from all sides and not just from left and right. And of course, the Pocket 4 also supports DJI microphones. This shot here, for example, was taken with the DJI Mic 3, which is also included in the Creator Combo. There are 4 additional important new features that we haven't seen in the previous categories. The Pocket 4 supports a very slow shutter speed. This enables a very special creative look. The Pocket 4 not only supports the app's glamour effects, it now also has various beauty filters. You can brighten skin tones, soften them, or even change the color of skin tone slightly. Here I've given myself a 10. Yes, I should probably use the filters, even though I'm generally not a big fan of them. The Pocket 4 supports gesture control, just like the Pocket 3, which now also supports it via an update. This means you can start and stop recording from a distance or activate tracking. And one upgrade that is particularly important to me personally comes at the very end. The Pocket 4 has 107 GB of internal storage, whereas the Pocket 3, unlike most other DJI devices, has no internal storage. In addition, the USB port has been upgraded to USB 3.1, which enables a much faster file transfer. And aside from longer trips, 107 GB should be more than enough for most people. Of course, the Pocket 4 also supports SD cards. As you can see, DJI has not built a completely new pocket camera, but has improved the Pocket 3 in many areas and added new features. For me personally, 4K 240 is the coolest new feature, but that may be different for you of course. The internal memory, longer battery life, and the improved photo mode are also important improvements. Then of course, there is the question of price. The standard combo of the DJI Pocket 4 costs $649 in the US and 499 euros in most EU countries. The Pocket 3 is now cheaper of course, and there are sure to be some interesting deals on it. You can find links to both cameras in the video description. If you buy from the DJI store, you will receive a small credit for future purchases. But retailers like Amazon sometimes offer slightly lower prices. In the US, the Pocket 4 may only be available there. Check out the links if you're interested. Do the new features and slightly better image quality justify an upgrade? Of course, that's something everyone has to decide for themselves. The Pocket 4 has many important new features, but the shots often look very similar, which isn't a bad thing, because the Pocket 3 already takes very good shots. It's going to be an interesting year for all fans of pocket cameras. If the rumors are true, there will also be a Pro Pocket camera from DJI, and competitors such as Insta360 are also expected to release a pocket camera this year, so it looks like it will be an exciting year. There will be a detailed tutorial on the Pocket 4 soon, so stay tuned, give me a like as feedback if you found the video interesting, and see you next time.